one. Go ahead.
Hey folks, it's Jeremy with Dragon's Breath Glassworks. We're doing something a little different today. I wanted to do a demo of a mug. We have been doing our series on what I wish I had known when I first started blowing glass, but I thought this time we would just do a simple mug. Hopefully you can hear a little better since I've got the microphone on. And we're in a different studio. We're in our Pennsylvania studio instead of our Kentucky. So with that said, we're just going to start our mug. Got a much larger furnace here. I still work in the Roman style out of this one though. We don't use a glory hole. We have one, we just don't use it. I'm gonna go into the furnace. I'm gonna get my first gather of glass. Now, as always, comes out nice and clean, good and hot. Looks orange only because it's so very hot. It's actually crystal clear. This mug is gonna be sort of purple over teal. So I'm gonna put a layer of teal on first. Those smaller chips don't fully melt in, but they'll melt pretty quickly once I go back into the furnace to heat it up. You got to be careful when you're using your furnace as a glory hole that you don't drip a lot of color chips or have anything break inside of it, because then you will contaminate the clear glass inside. Now that we've got that nice coating, I'm going to let it air cool just for a moment before I pick up that purple. I don't want a full coat of the purple because I do want to see the teal underneath. And now we'll melt these much larger chips in and shape them up on the marver a little bit. These purple chips take just a little bit longer to melt in. For those of you who aren't super familiar with glass blowing and the color technology and how it works, you get your color by adding different metals into the glass to change the color. And that's done when it's very, very hot. These chips are called frit. They are crushed up, and then we buy them like this and melt them into the surface of the glass. So it's nice and hot. I'm gonna smooth it out just a little bit, pulling that back and off the end of the pipe. I'm gonna add some movement to the color using my tweezers. I'm gonna grab that glass and twist and swirl that color up. You can see a couple different things happening here. Of course, you can see the texture being created, little dark spots where it's cooling off where I grab it. The texture can be an issue. Those large divots, if you don't smooth them out, melt them in, you can have air bubbles form on your piece. You see, we don't have enough glass to make the size piece that we want to make, and that viscous liquid in the furnace is going to not flow into all these little pinches very easily. And so when that happens, it can trap large air bubbles near the surface. Now, I personally am a fan of small air bubbles. I like the way they look. I think they give character to a piece, but large ones can be a structural issue. If you have real large air bubbles, what ends up happening is they can get too close to the surface, and then they can blister and pop after the piece is finished, and you get little sharp spots on the surface of your glass that mar its appearance and make it unsafe to use. We don't want that, so I'm going to melt the texture away to keep the movement in the color. Most of that has melted away on its own, and I can press out what hasn't melted on this table. Nice, smooth, controlled movements are key. All right, now this is solid. We're going to make it hollow using the puff and cap technique. I'm going to blow into the pipe, trapping the air inside with my thumb. The pressure is building up as that air heats up and expands. It takes a little bit for that color to get moving, but once it does, it will start to push the glass out of the way. And sometimes, especially when I'm moving a little slower for a demonstration, it doesn't want to come out right away, but there it goes. It's slowly pushing its way out. You're going to see it start to bulge here in just a second. Notice I'm always turning the pipe even while I'm waiting for this bubble to come out. If I don't, it will move ever so slightly down towards the floor and the bubble will come out unevenly. A lot of glass blowers, when they're first learning, forget that. They get so focused on the bubble, they let the glass bend and tilt, and they don't get an even distribution of their bubble, which makes the rest of the piece much more difficult. I'm going to let this cool off for a moment, and I'll go back in the furnace and get my next gather. This is an okay shape. I would prefer a little bit longer in most cases, but it's cooled off a bit more than I'd like. I don't want to force it into shape, and I don't really want to take the time to reheat it. So this will be fine as long as I work with this shape in mind. All right, back into the furnace for my second gather of glass. Now I'm going to use my favorite tool, my favorite shaping tool anyway, ordinary paper that I've soaked in water. I like my paper really wet. I've been told by many glass blowers that it's too wet, but I prefer it because it lets me get right on an extremely hot gather of glass. That was 2,000 degree glass coming out of the furnace, but I'm able to just go ahead and grab it and start immediately squeezing it into shape. I use paper 90% of the time. That steam coming off there is the key to making this work. It allows the tool to kind of flow smoothly across the surface of the glass without leaving any impurities in the glass, and it protects the tool. A lot of glass blowers prefer wooden shaping blocks. This is an example of a German block. It's a round block, and they're great. I use them frequently, mostly for controlling the size of ornaments or pumpkins or bowls, but and they work on the same principle, that steam creating a barrier between the glass and the tool. But I just prefer paper. It's the closest you're going to get to hand sculpting glass. I'm going to go back in the furnace and reheat this. Anytime you touch glass with a tool, especially a wet one like the paper or the block, you're sucking heat out, and often that's an uneven cooling. You'll get these layers of cold glass on the surface and then hotter layer underneath and then a colder layer below that. And it's really good to just get this back into the furnace, let it reheat, and soak down into the core so everything's moving at the same rate. Now when I come out of here, I will cool the bottom down. You see I left a lot of clear glass at the bottom, and I'm going to cool it even further to preserve that shape and thickness, because as I inflate this mug that we're going to make, I want to really push that bubble down and stretch the piece longer. It'll make for a thinner lip and just an easier drinking vessel. So I'm going to cool that bottom. I prefer these very sharply tapered, thick bottoms when I do this. Inflating, letting the gravity and just pull that glass, stretching it longer. You can use tools to stretch it out, but then you leave tool marks. I prefer not to do that. I'm going to take another heat and then we'll stretch this out a little bit longer. It's got that nice thick bottom on it still, so I don't have to worry about overblowing and thinning it out too much. You have to be careful with this technique if you are not familiar with the way glass moves, if you're just learning how to do this. If your glass is too hot and you do that, you will lose control of it. It's time to start flattening this. Tightening down my jack line a little bit. Let's have one more flash of heat. I'm going to put a punty rod into the heat to warm up, and then I'm going to have Tommy come in and bring me a punty. I often work alone, but for something like a mug, it's really helpful to have somebody helping you out, and I'm fortunate enough to have Tommy assisting me today. So he's going to let that pipe warm up for about 10 to 15 seconds. I don't have a pipe warmer in this shop. I used to. I find that they're a waste of space and fuel. So all right, Tommy, I will take that punty. A punty is another metal rod with some glass on the end. Tommy's going to shape that into a dome about 1/16 of an inch off the end of the pipe. Now, I like my punties made real fast and brought to me really hot. I don't care for the shape, reheat, that a lot of punties use. I'm going to taper that up. Go ahead and turn. And off. Cooling it down just a little bit. This is straight out of the furnace. We did not reheat this at all between gathering and applying. In fact, we just repeatedly cooled it. This makes for a punny that's meant to be on for a very short period of time, but it usually comes off very cleanly and allows me to work faster than your typical slow punnies. So, but as I always say, use the techniques that work best for you to make the kind of work that you want to make. A gentle tap, relax, and it pops right off. And Tommy made sure by that little dip down, what he was doing there was making sure that if there were any little chips of glass that were still inside, got it, that they fell out instead of back down into the piece. If you don't do that, sometimes you can get little chips of glass that get caught up in the shoulder of the piece, and then when you heat it up to open, they will fuse to the inside, and you'll get this little almost sharp little burr on the inside of the piece. So that's one way to prevent that. If your opening is real tight, sometimes you'll want to tap the piece with a tweezer or the edge of a butter knife or something like that to create a vibration to make that piece fall out. Most of the time there is nothing inside, but just take the extra second to let that clear. Now I'm heating up the top edge. This broke off really clean, and it was pretty thin up there because of the way I blow them out, so I'm not going to need to tweeze this and trim it. So what's going to happen is while I'm warming this up, I'm going to take a flash to make sure it doesn't get too cold on the back end. While I'm warming up the front end, I am going to set up a pipe so that Tommy will be able to bring me the handle for our mug. And the handles are the most difficult part of that process, mainly because they're the part that you get the least amount of practice with. At the very last step before removing it from the punty, and so you get the least amount of chance to practice it while you're learning how to make pieces like this. So as you can see, there's a graduated heat. There's a nice bright orange lip. I'm all right. It's so clean I don't even need to paddle the front edge. I'm just going to stretch it open. Tommy, go ahead and start up the handle, please. We got its nice taper. If that edge weren't so clean, I would have normally had somebody use a wooden paddle to flatten the edge, or really just control it while I stretched open the lip. But here's our basic shape. Tommy's going to take 2 gathers to warm this up and get enough glass. I'm going to give you a real quick peek of what this is going to look like before we put the handle on. I'm going to take a flash of heat while Tommy's letting his first gather cool down. He doesn't need a lot more glass than he has here, just another half gather on top. So he's going to go in as soon as I come out. These punnies, as I said, are not meant to last a long time when they go on this fast, and it's already starting to cool down. So I'm going to just torch the punny while Tommy is shaping the handle. He's going to come out. He's going to shape that up very nice and smooth. Pulling back. Pull back on the marver on that. It's been about 1.5 years since Tommy has brought me a handle for a mug. Give that a quick flash of heat. He's going to give it about 5 seconds in the heat. Actually, I'm going to take a flash while I'm waiting. Let me go ahead and come in. This is the other difficult thing about working out of just the furnace. When I come out, Tommy, heat that back up, please. Is you have to kind of work around your help or your assistant or your team, whatever you want to call it, when you are working out of just the furnace. All right, Tommy, one smooth pass on the marver and bring that over, please. Pulling back as you do, and bring that. Perfect. Come from right in front, and gentle, relax. Up. I'm going to fuse this together. And that's a nice heat. See how that pulls up nice and even? It's all about the temperature. By blowing on the back side, it allows me to get a really nice shape when I bend it over. I like to use a stainless steel rod to shape the handles after they go on. Some people use graphite, some people use mild steel, some people use the back of the tweezers. It doesn't really matter as long as you're comfortable with the tool that you're using. I'm gonna take another heat, shape this handle up just a little bit more, and then it will be time to remove the mug from the pipe. Tommy has already gloved up. When you have an assistant who knows the timing of the piece, you really don't have to communicate what you need. By angling it down, that handle is hot, I'm letting it pull down. It's helping shape. Again, I am a fan of the theory that the less you tool the glass, the nicer it looks. So I use gravity as much as possible to shape the glass. But there's our mug, folks. Now these kind of mugs is a soft glass, so it's not good for hot beverages, but it is great for cold beverages, and this will be a nice beer or tea mug for the person who ordered it. There's lots of different ways you can remove the piece from the punny when you're finished. A lot of people like to use tweezers or water or a wooden stick. I like this butter knife. It's got a real thin blade, lets me get it right up into the punny connection, and a heavy handle so that when it's time, go ahead and take that. It pops right off. In the box, please. And into the box it goes. At the end of the process, that goes into a 925-degree oven to cool down safely. If I left it out in the open air, the different sections and thicknesses would cool and shrink at different rates, and it would literally rip itself apart. So to stop that, we stabilize the temperature at 925 degrees, and then tonight, when I'm all done working, I start a 14-hour cooling cycle to bring those pieces down to room temperature. It's called annealing, and it's how we make everything in our shop. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you catch us next time. Thanks a lot.